Hello, welcome to our Gender Equity and Gender Justice Workshop hosted by Muslim Children's Aid and Support Services, funded by Heritage Canada. In our workshop, we'll be exploring gender roles, expectations, and inequities while addressing sensitive topics through an Islamic framework and with compassion. So our workshop goals for today are to explore the concepts of gender equity and gender justice through a faith-informed lens, and to also understand how patriarchal systems impact individuals and communities, along with examining Islamic teachings on equality, justice, and dignity. Our fourth objective is to create space for critical reflection, dialogue, and shared learning. And lastly, to empower participants to take meaningful actions towards gender justice in their personal and community lives. To start off, it's important to understand how Islam views gender roles and really kind of gender expectations. And one of the main messages from Islam and the Quran is that we were created as equals. So this is a verse from Surah Al-Hujurat which says, "O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female and made you peoples and tribes that you may know one another." So this verse really shows us that all people are equal and deserve dignity no matter what their gender is. In Islam, men and women are seen as partners and were created equally by God, with shared responsibilities to support and care for one another. Faith communities are meant to reflect this equality by valuing everyone's roles and contributions, and this really makes our journey towards gender equity start with recognizing this shared humanity that we have. Now that we have a basic introduction into how Islam really supports the equality between genders, we're going to take a deeper look into Islamic approaches to gender studies. Islam teaches that men and women are equal, deserving of justice, dignity, and respect. Historically, it gave women groundbreaking rights to education, own property, and speak in court, rights that still matter today. Before Islam, women often had no legal status and were often also excluded from inheritance entirely, and this is where we see Islam really stepping in and providing those rights to women. Islam explicitly granted women the right to own, manage, and dispose of their own property independently, even after marriage. And we have many examples of this. So we have examples of inheritance in the Quran of what every person gets, and the idea that, historically women had no rights, and then Islam provided this really shows us how it values each gender. Now, many Muslim communities are applying these ancient principles to modern life by supporting female leaders, fighting violence against women, and ensuring everyone has a fair chance to participate. This commitment to fairness isn't new. It's a core part of Islam, as I've kind of briefly touched upon. Musawwah, which is a global movement for equality and justice in the Muslim family, it also looks at working at the intersection of faith, scholarship, and advocacy. So this is a really nice organization that combines a lot of these ideas and supports gender roles and really supports gender justice for women specifically. So from understanding how Islam views, gender and how it provides rights, dignity, and equality for both, it's really important to distinguish the harmful norms and inequalities that we have today due to culture at times or just the way society is framed. So patriarchal systems create deep unfairness that often hurt the dignity of women, girls, and people with diverse gender identities. And these systems shape daily life. They limit opportunities and cause real harm to people in our communities. One of them is to really understand the disproportionate impact that often is faced by women and girls, which are historically marginalized groups, and how we're perpetuating the cycles of injustice across generations. One of the biggest things that we have to discuss and really understand is cultural, misinformation. So oftentimes there are harmful norms that are often mistakenly presented as religious requirements that really obscure faith's genuine commitment to justice. And it's important to distinguish cultural practice from theological principle to ensure that we're taking those first steps towards meaningful reform. Oftentimes we do intertwine culture and religion, and this is often seen across different communities. So while something is culturally present, there's not always backing in faith for those ideas. And the last thing to talk about is also structural barriers. So, unequal access to education, leaderships, and legal recourse reinforces gender inequality within both religious institutions and the broader society, which demands intentional, systematic response from communities of faith, especially since faith communities have this understanding and are given a framework of how gender justice works, and that everyone should, has the right to opportunities, has the right to dignity, and has the right to fairness. So we do need to step up as communities of faith and really ensure that once we see these injustices happening, we are standing up against it. After examining how Islam and faith views gender and how there are a lot of harmful norms and inequities present, specifically those faced by marginalized groups such as girls and women, it's important that we're calling everyone to action. So, gender justice is about achieving equality, inclusion, and dignity for all, which allows us to transform individuals and communities so that they live and work in just relationships. It calls us beyond charity to structural change, and beyond tolerance to genuine belonging. One call to action is to challenge patriarchy. So, name and dismantle systems of power that deny full humanity to any person. Patriarchal structures are constructed and can be dismantled through intentional collective actions rooted in faith and principle. Examples of this is ensuring that we are holding whether it's communities, organizations, institutions accountable for when they fail to provide equity between genders. And we have a lot of examples, and I will not start on those, but it's really important that if we're seeing it, we're calling it out, we're standing against them, and we're speaking up about them. Another way that we can kind of have this spark to action is to transform communities. So organizations across sectors, whether they're faith-based, secular, governmental, or grassroots, should unite in recognizing that true progress requires centering the voices of those most affected by gender inequality, building relationships of mutual respect and shared accountability. A lot of this transformational work only happens when we have numbers, and as they say, there is power in numbers. So when we're working with different organizations and there's collaboration and uniting together, it does allow for that transformative change to happen. The third is to build just relationships. So really cultivate partnerships of mutual respect, accountability, and shared dignity within families, congregations, workplaces, and civic life, so that justice becomes not merely a principle but a lived reality for every person. And how this happens is often allowing ourselves to be called out if we are in the wrong. Maybe there are certain practices that are just we've done for a while and not aware of, and so allowing ourselves to be called out and learning from those mistakes. We can also learn from communities around us, especially again raising those voices of marginalized groups and learning from lived experiences of people that go through it. Now that we have looked at how Islam views and promotes gender justice and equality, it's really important that we're also looking at Islam's mandate for justice. So it's really far from endorsing patriarchy. Islam fundamentally rejects oppressive power structures that deny human dignity. Its core tenets provide an actionable framework for gender justice. It actively challenges harmful norms and practices that are often mistakenly attributed to faith. And the framework developed by this is one, to see adl as a foundation. So adl means fairness, balance, and equity in all aspects of life, including gender relations. It really calls for upholding the rights and dignity of every individual, which transcends cultural biases that have often masqueraded as religious obligation. The second point in this framework is inherent equality. Islamic teachings emphasize the spiritual and human equality of men and women, created as partners with mutual rights and responsibilities. So this promotes a balanced society where we can all thrive, contribute, and lead. The third point is active resistance to oppression. Historically and contemporarily, Islamic scholars and activists have leveraged these principles to advocate for women's rights, challenge discriminatory practices, and build communities rooted in justice. Sisters in Islam exemplifies this tradition of reform that is grounded of faith. So, with this being said, it's really important that if we want to strive for justice through an Islamic framework, we are ensuring that we have adl, which is, fairness, balance, equity in all interactions and all aspects for our life. For the second point, inherent equality, it's really important to understand while, sometimes men and women can have different roles and responsibilities, there is still equity and equality with those. So, for instance, while let's say traditionally, a man works to provide for the family and the woman takes care of the family, there should be some sort of balance with that doesn't exclude the father from being active with his children, helping out in the house, or even like everyday chores. We often see that present, and oftentimes it is due to misinformation or just like ideas from culture. And to hold ourselves as Muslims, it's important that we're not only fair in what we do, but we're actively standing against oppression. Another core tenet of Islam is really to be firm in justice, and we'll explore this later on, but really when we see it, we call it out. And Sisters in Islam is a wonderful organization that exemplifies how this work is done. I wanted to take some time to also share some Islamic movements that are leading the way in gender justice. So, across traditions, continents, faith-based organizations are reclaiming justice at the heart of their traditions, challenging patriarchal interpretations, and building movements for outlasting change. The first one is Side by Side, also Act Alliance, and this is a global interfaith movement that reclaims faith for equality and dignity. Their gender justice program counters backlash against women's rights and positions faith actors as agents of transformative change. Both links were put in there, so please take a look at those. The second is Musawah, which is a global movement for equality and justice in the Muslim family. They partner with different organizations to really bring justice to to gender. And for example, they've partnered with Sisters in Islam, where they have challenged patriarchal interpretations of Sharia, and they advocate for women's dignity and legal reform worldwide. So both links were also put in there for you to take a look at and really, see how these organizations and communities are advocating for gender justice and specifically for women. The third is Karama, which is a Muslim women's lawyers firm for human rights that empowers women through Islamic law. They promote leadership, legal education, and they also the dismantling of patriarchal structures in the pursuit of justice and care for all. The link is also put in there. While we've mentioned a lot of organizations that use Islam to really lead the way for justice for different people, we wanted to also talk about organizations that are often not mentioned. As you can see here, there's no names, but a lot of grassroots faith communities are organizing from within their traditions. They're amplifying women's leaderships, they're creating safe spaces for dialogue, and really building a new generation of gender justice advocates rooted in faith. There are many of these that exist, so we'll share a few later on, but really a lot of this work is being done, so it's important that we're not only seeing these large organizations, but looking at our own communities and seeing what movements are happening in them. When faith communities support gender justice, they show what God wants for the world, a fair place where everyone is respected. Every voice matters and everyone's dignity is strongly protected. So we're really, using faith to build justice, and these are ideologies present in Islam and a lot of other, places. So it's important that we're always going back to really see how we can support and build justice for everyone. In conversations around gender justice and gender roles and family dynamics, structures, but also culture and religion, it's really important that we're addressing sensitive topics with respect, as these often can be sensitive for different families or individuals depending on how the conversations coming up or their own views or lived experiences with it. And even more that faith and tradition and culture are kind of all intertwined together. So we just want to ensure that we are speaking with truth, with grace, we're confronting harm, but also nurturing belonging for every person. How we hold these conversations matter as much as what we say. So when we're talking about different conversations or topics, it's important that we are rooted in faith and that we're basing every conversation on our holy text and real life stories. So whether it's the Quran, the different hadiths that we have, and this really just gives us an understanding, as for many, Islam is a guide on how to live your life. So always referring back to those helps us ensure that we are following what is written for us and in the way that it should be. So really using the true values of our faith to build understanding and stop people from using religion to hurt others. This has been done and this continues to be done, but it doesn't take away from how just Islam is. So it's really important that we're always rooting conversations in faith, really referring back to holy texts and real life stories such as hadiths and all that to ensure what we are saying is Islamically correct. The second way to really address these sensitive topics with respect is to have safe spaces. So we have to create environments where everyone, especially those often ignored, feel safe to speak. Feeling safe is necessary for honest and life-changing talks. And as we've seen, oftentimes women and girls tend to be disregarded from a lot of conversations. So making spaces for them, allowing them to speak the way they and really share their own lived experiences. It's really important that in these safe spaces we are ensuring that we keep our biases in check and that we're not judging people harshly, as even though it tends to be human nature to judge at times, we're ensuring that those judgments do not impact our relationship, or we can, adjust them if there is unfairness in it, or if we're challenging ideas that we've had for a while, and it can often be difficult to really change or unlearn what we know from before. But having those safe spaces free of judgment is so essential to really have these conversations and push forward for change. I also wanted to bring in an ayah from Surah Al-Hujurat that really talks about how it's important that we're not ridiculing people or judging people or just acting in ways that are not respectful. So the ayah says, "O you who have believed, let not a people ridicule another people, nor insult one another by nicknames." So this can be applied in different things, but especially if we're opening those environments and spaces for conversation, we're not making fun of people, we're not ridiculing them, and we're not judging them. The third way is really being sensitive and being bold. The third way is that we're approaching truth with kindness. So being sensitive and being bold, they go together. Faith communities should speak up and really speak the truth kindly and stop harm while making sure everyone feels that they truly belong and are respected. And the fourth one is that we are working for fairness at all levels in our society, in our communities, at home, and even within ourselves. So we've looked at Karama before, and they really show us how we can do this by teaching women about law and leadership based on Islamic values. So these changes are not just on a large scale. We cannot expect societal changes to occur or community-based changes. We have to start at different levels, and they have to also be small actions that we start. So if you're not able to really push these big changes, start with your family, within yourself, within your community. And if we're all approaching it that way, then we are working towards building a just society. As we've spoken a lot about gender justice and equity and equality, it's really important to understand that as we push and strive for this, it's all about realizing full humanity. So, gender justice means looking out for our neighbors and respecting the full humanity of every person. And this ties back into those values that we've spoken about before. So, adil, dignity, respect, all of those. It's really important that we're holding them for every single person, and it's everyone's right. So, this requires two things. So, helping people with their immediate needs today, but also working to change unfair systems for tomorrow. So, in addressing immediate needs, it's really important that in order to strive for justice, that we are supporting those hurt by unfair systems with kindness and practical actions. We must provide immediate help while also fighting for long-term change. So in the previous slide, we talked about ways of, holding conversations to change ideologies that have existed or that oppose a lot of what we've spoken about. So we have to recognize as well that in when gender justice is not present, a lot of individuals are often facing barriers, are facing harm, and then that's where addressing those immediate needs steps in. So as we're doing that for those short-term goals, we're also planning long-term goals, and this is all about reforming structures and really transformational change. So pushing for lasting change is how organizations run, how we interpret culture, and how laws are made. The goal is to make justice a permanent rule, not just a one-time favor. One way to really start by this is to listen first and then lead later. So really making sure that marginalized voices are heard by doing things every day. So for example, in meetings, if you find that often the men are speaking or maybe hold more positions of leadership, you can ask women for their opinions before you share yours. That way you're making space for their voices to be heard. Again, in the community, we can ask women what they need instead of guessing. Oftentimes we like to assume that we know what a person needs, but just by asking and listening, it can really transform the lives of many. In online spaces, we can share and support posts from groups led by women. And at home is to truly listen to the dreams and goals of the girls and women in your life and not to let societal expectations or pressures hinder those goals. We are more capable than a lot of individuals see, so ensuring that we're offering those same opportunities to the women and girls is just as important to ensure that we're also striving for gender justice and equity. Now I want to give more practical applications in everyday life and how you can strive and push for gender justice. So every person has a part to play. Everyone needs to commit to treating everyone with dignity, fairness, and care. In previous slides, we've given some examples. So in the previous slide, we talked about just even the power of listening and how transformational that is. And in this slide, I'm going to provide 3 ways of really pushing and promoting gender justice. So the first is to educate yourself. So make learning part of your routine. Whether you're listening to a podcast on gender justice during your commute, whether you're asking women in your life about the roles, that they have, that they were expected to play growing up, or even their lived experiences, or even starting a casual book club, sharing knowledge is the first step towards change, and we have to take that part in educating ourselves. This allows us to see the inequities for what they are, to see the barriers, to, understand how marginalized people are lacking from a lot of considerations. So by educating ourselves, it allows us to take steps 2 and 3. Step 2 is to advocate, so you can take action in your daily life. The simplest example of this is if you hear a sexist comment at work or at home, you can calmly say that's not okay. Another way, depending on, of course, your environment, is to recommend women for jobs and leadership roles. You can also support women-owned businesses, and if you see harassment, check on the person being hurt. A lot of the times, we assume that we can't advocate because we are in different maybe leadership positions, or we don't have a lot of say, but it can start at your family. It can start with strangers outside, and it can start just by calling something out that you hear that is not okay. The third is to join the movement. So become part of the movement. And the movement that we talk about is gender justice for women, especially as we've explored before, they are really marginalized by this disproportionately. And that's why we have to ensure that, we are pushing them up and seeking for their justice. So one way to do this is to attend local events for the month. So for example, like Musawa has some, Sisters in Islam has some online. You can even donate a small amount to a women's charity. Watch a documentary, for example. We know that by watching online things and reposting all of that, it does garner attention. Or even if you're able to mentor a young woman about her rights and dreams. So oftentimes, and goes back to the first point of the importance of education, power really comes from knowledge, knowing your rights, knowing what you are entitled to, knowing what you can do is so transformational. And a lot of young girls and women are not often given this luxury of knowing what their rights are. They are often misled, unfortunately, or they're not allowed the same opportunities. So by advocating for them and really showing what their rights are in Islam, it can help strive for justice for them. So again, this is just a thing at the bottom that we spoke about. So the ACT Alliance reminds us that discrimination disproportionately affects women and girls from historically marginalized groups, which makes our collective action an urgent one. We also wanted to share some key resources that you can take a look at if you are looking at how to really do more in the community, who to support. And these are some examples. Again, there's many out there, but one example is the Women's Center of York Region. So this is all about empowerment and gender equity. It provides, essential programs focused on women's economic independence, personal growth, and gender equity to help women navigate life transitions and achieve self-sufficiency. The second is the Noor Cultural Center. So this is for Muslim women's voices, and it's really a Toronto-based institution that's dedicated to fostering critical dialogue and supporting the voices of Muslim women. They also promote gender justice through the lens of faith, community, and inclusive scholarly engagement. The third is the Toronto Rape Crisis Center. So you can, advocate for them, support, and this is a GTA-based organization that provides trauma-informed support, crisis intervention, and systematic advocacy to challenge gender-based violence and promote the safety and rights of all women. There's different ways you can support, whether it's donating or if you go on their page, they have different, things that you can help out with. And the fourth is MCAS, of course. So this is all about community empowerment. So we believe in, empowering communities by providing vital family services that also promote gender justice, fostering community empowerment through a holistic approach. I wanted to also share, so one of the key programs at MCAS is called Connection Stitched with Love. So even a simple program like that, which is all about knitting, sewing, crocheting for women, offers a space of connection, a space of belonging, and really allowing women to connect and, just build that sense of community. So even donating to that or supporting that, these are all ways that we can strive for gender justice. So thank you for listening to this workshop, and we are hoping that by the end of it, you're really motivated and empowered to build justice together with us. So as we conclude today's workshop, let's carry forward the spirit of equity and dignity into our homes, our workplaces, and communities. I wanted to leave this beautiful verse at the end from Surah An-Nisa that talks about, O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice, witness for Allah, even if it be against yourselves or parents and relatives. And the power that comes from this verse is how we understand that justice is so essential. I mean, it's a core tenet in Islam, and that Allah calls for us even if it is standing against ourselves, our parents, our communities, which makes it even more critical and important. So, ensuring that we are standing firm in that justice and trying in what we can. Again, everyone has different capabilities, so supporting how you can. And the last thing is a small reflection post. So, in the coming days, I would like you to pick one small thing you can do to break down unfairness in your own circle, or how will you stand up for justice today? So, again, thank you for listening, and we're hoping that a lot of these ideas resonated and have moved you to be more active and work together with us to build justice and really support gender justice. Thank you.